One, two, three. Welcome to BuildWise, the podcast where construction meets wisdom. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the construction industry. We're going to share insightful tips, dive into the latest trends. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started in your journey in construction, BuildWise is your go-to source for valuable insights. Let's build a smarter, wiser future together. Like and subscribe now and stay tuned for a foundation of knowledge in every episode. I am your host, Dan O'Neill, and today we're going to be discussing, I believe, client relationships.
Because, as we all know, in business, clients are what drive our business. If we don't have clients, we're not going to have a business to run. So it's really important, as we all know, to foster the right kind of relationships. And, sometimes there's a strategy. Sometimes it's just, being a people person, which not everybody is. But what do you do to foster client relationships appropriately?
I don't know if I'm a people person or not. I don't know if that's a good term for it.
Well, I think I've seen you interact with people, and, I think you have a really good balance of, having business and your relationships. I think that you manage relationships well, and I believe, if I remember correctly, one of your past bosses or mentors had said that the key to a successful business is relationships.
That's right. And since you mentioned the word mentors, I've had quite a few over the years, and it's invaluable to have good mentors. I've learned a lot from each one.
Yeah.
And so, and the client relationship, it was kind of funny. I worked for this very big company, and I actually got to fly on a plane with the owner of the company. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year type of company. And I said, what is your number one reason for success? And he didn't hesitate, and he said, relationships. And he goes, I'm not talking about the fake, take them to dinner and parties and, all this stuff. He goes, actually care, really get to know your client and do things, sometimes whether you get paid or not, and just care. And I was like, wow, okay. And I'd worked for a lot of construction companies that, they were sending people football tickets and, taking them to parties and bars and, and it just, those aren't the kind of relationships that, he's talking about.
Well, yeah, and that's fun and all, but if at the end of the day, you might get to go to a football game or something, but if you don't feel like your contractor truly cares about you or your project, your home that you're building, then it's not going to mean anything. So,
yeah, client relationships it's a two-way street. The client's got to care too about the contractor. And back in the day, and I know they still do it today, but it's a little more rare, is where you find your contractor, you stick with them, you negotiate projects, you get this working relationship, and it really does make a difference in everything from how you handle every problem. It's not guarded. You follow procedure still, but it's not, it's not as guarded.
Right. Do you foster your relationships with residential clients differently than you do with commercial clients, or is it the same?
It's different.
In what way?
So, some aren't, but I guess it's not fair to categorize everybody in that. But, some of the best client relationships have been my commercial ones.
Okay.
And they are, because in the commercial industry, things are kind of known. They're normal. They're the procedures are normal. Issues are normal. Like they know they're not going to go into a project, not have an issue. They really do understand that, hey, we got this problem. We got this RFI. The residentials are more emotional about it.
Yeah.
And they get very, like, oh, you should have known. I'm like,
Frazzled.
why,
Yeah.
and it's just, they just don't understand the process or what really goes into construction. And that's what this podcast is all about, by the way, is I really want to elevate, one, the homeowner, and the subcontractor base and anybody out there getting started in construction, whether you're being a residential superintendent or a commercial superintendent or a project manager, whatever. You know, these things, you know, you got to pay attention to these things. There's going to be way more emotion, way more drama involved in residential.
So be prepared.
So be prepared. And they're going to have, there's always drama in commercial too, but
It is different.
It's a little more matter of fact.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, hey, we ran into underground water. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, put a price together. Let's meet, write an RFI, go get a bid, whatever. You know, and then you sit down. They either sign it or they don't. You know, whatever. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah. So then with when there are any kind of issues or client feedback and you have to work with the client, how do you best handle that? Because, you know, you just described how there can be drama and more emotions, especially with residential. If it's a delicate situation, how do you go to the client and be like, hey, we ran into something that we, you know, obviously couldn't anticipate for, and ... you know, how do you handle that? How do you handle their emotions?
You're talking for residential?
Sure, yeah. I mean, even if it is commercial, because, you know, everybody ranges in different personalities. So I'm sure you kind of get a feel for their personality ahead of time. But how do you just approach issues with a client in general?
So, well, I mean, you got to take each client. You got to kind of, that's the relationship part, right, of the client. Mm-hmm. So you got to kind of know how to approach them, when to approach them, that kind of stuff. You know, there's always tough subjects in every. If there's an issue, sometimes it can always be a tough subject, especially if the budgets are running dry and you know, there's been other issues or whatever, and you know the emotions start to escalate, and that's when the problem doesn't get resolved very well. Mm-hmm. It just turns into kind of a dramatic issue. But probably pre-thinking the project, pointing out the potential issues that could come up.
Yeah.
And then being able to go, hey, look, you know, we talked about this early on, and not even talk about it, probably put it in writing, but then, you know, hit those as you're going through the project.
And if somebody is going to be starting a general contracting business, would you give them the exact same advice that your mentor gave you? Have you found that his advice stands firm and true?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got some people that you're never going to make happy.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't do much about that. I mean, other than just get it done and get out of there.
Yeah. So then how do you work with clients that have what you say, just in general, but a champagne taste, but on a beer budget?
There's a lot of that.
Because that can be hard. I understand. Like, if I'm going to go build a house, I want to put the best things in there. But if I only have a beer budget, I'm not going to be able to do that. You got to break the sad news to them.
Well, and here's the problem is you can break that news to them, right? Mm-hmm. You can say, hey, look, your budget doesn't allow this, but they just go, I want it. And it's like,
yeah,
you know, it's like the best clients that, you know, when they know they got that kind of budget and you go to them and go, hey man, I would love to put that in there for you, but you just can't afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, based on the budget you gave me, right? Or based on the budget you signed that we agreed to. Now, if you want to found some money, you got a tax return that we didn't know about or something, you want to throw that in the pile and go do it, great.
Yeah.
But the best ones are the ones that go, you know what, you're right. Let me go look for an alternative. What's my square footage number to stick around? And I'll tell them, and they go out and they look for it, and they go, hey man, good news, I found this. You know, it's right within the budget. I'm like, great. You know, that's awesome. But the worst ones are, you go, that's not in your budget, and they just insist on this product or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they get all irritated when you send them a change order and things escalate, and you're like,
Well, yeah, that's
You've
what you
got
asked for.
you signed the same budget you're making me live to. You've got to, not just the contractor that has to live within the budget. It's
Yeah.
the client.
Yeah. And I guess in some, like with some things, you can, as the contractor, get creative with it. Like if there's a certain, if they want a wood beam in their house and they can't necessarily afford, the most expensive kind of material, it's like, well, we can be creative and make a faux beam. I mean, is that a good example to use? I just was coming off with something off the top of my head, but
No, I mean, faux beams can be as much or more than real sometimes, but
oh,
then sometimes you've got labor into making that faux beam look like what you want. So,
that's true. The labor.
and that's the other thing too. It's, you got to allow your contractor to try to give you the information that, like, hey, I know that sounds cheaper, but it really is going to cost us a lot of labor to do that.
Yeah, that
You're
makes
probably
sense.
better off, if you really want that, you're probably better off to just buy that product already pre-done, and we stick it up there, and you walk away and you spend 2 hours instead of 15 hours per beam.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
And I think too, a lot of clients go into, they kind of think with their creative mind as well and be like, oh, well, maybe we can make it work this way. And they have to learn to trust the contractor when they say that's actually the more expensive route. That's not actually going to be the less expensive route. So I was just adding to that that's a good point.
yeah, if you've got a contractor that is thinking that way from the beginning,
Yeah.
right? And hopefully you've got the right contractor and stuff like that.
So, and this goes a little bit away from client relationships, but when you are working with clients, each project is going to have a different type of contract. And do you base your contracts off of the client or the project?
Well, probably a little of both. Each project, in fact, we just discussed this before the podcast. We have a project that we're talking about, which way we want to bid it, right?
Right.
And so, hard bid, cost plus, negotiated fee, there's lump sum, there's not to exceed.
Yeah.
There's all these different things. And it's really important for you to know which one you're signing. So, you do a cost plus, that means every nickel and dime it costs that contractor plus a fee that's stated. So it'll be cost plus 10, cost plus 25, whatever they're charging, right? Whatever you agreed to. And so, yeah. And then others, it's a lump sum, which basically you say, I'm going to build this for $100,000. And pretty much if it's on the plans or something you discussed or something paperwork wise, you got to stick within that budget.
Yeah.
But it has room for change orders and different things and stuff like that. Then like a not to exceed is more along the lines of, it's similar to that, but there's some unknowns, and you know what the client's budget is, like max, like the threshold of pain. And you say, look, I think we can get it done for this, but I can pretty much guarantee we won't go past this.
Right.
And so you do like an NTE number, but you got budget and you work towards it. And then, pretty much you try to offset as much as you can so you don't exceed that number that you promised. And then guaranteed max, that's pretty much you guarantee that we ain't going above and beyond this number. All of them have caveats, circumstances, unforeseen conditions. I mean, there's a lot of things you can't control.
Right. Do you have any examples of a cost plus contract that we could look at?
I don't have it up on the screen if that's what you're asking.
I was, but that's okay. That's totally fine. We're going to be getting into a podcast on contracts at a later date, so we can pull it up then. I was just more curious if you had one, but contracts for commercial clients and residential clients, are they typically the same, or are they different?
Well, I mean, they can be. I mean, it just depends. Usually you're more proprietary contracts that are, written by the contractor's attorney or whatever, usually could be a little more biased towards the contractor if you're not careful. So you got to watch out for that. And then, and it's, I mean, I don't care who you are. If you do that, they're going to be. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
the nature of the beast, right? So, but then there's a company out there that's been around for a long time. It's the AIA,
Yeah.
American Institute of Architects, and they have just about every construction document you can think of that has been, it's widely proven throughout the United States, and it's been vetted by contractors, attorneys, you name it. And it's pretty much your best well-rounded contract. They charge you for them. You know, you can either subscribe to them and just have total access, or you can buy them one at a time.
Yeah.
And they've got great change order modules and different things. And they really are pretty nice.
Yeah. We are not sponsored by them. We are, and
No.
we just were, he's
they
used them, and
Yeah.
his
So
opinions on them.
yeah, but I mean they do have a good product, and if I do a commercial project that requires something like that, we can access it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sure you probably have, with how long you've been in the business, some good testimonies. What have been some of the best relationships that you've had from your contracting business? And have you walked away from business and maintained a relationship with some of these clients afterward?
Yeah, I mean, we just did a bunch of work out at the National Labs, Idaho National Labs, and did a great job. They really liked what we did. We enjoyed working with them. They were great.
Yeah.
And we actually call and chat all the time. In California, I got really good friend, actually the whole family, on the last big project we did. Great relationship. They loved what I did and what our team did, and just really from that day forward, we still email, text, joke around,
Yeah.
So yeah, and and there's when people that are professional enough to see what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
they really can, they get an appreciation for it, I guess. I've had others that have on a project prior to that start off very adversarial.
Yeah.
And thought that I was doing all these RFIs, doing all this stuff to create change orders. And I said, no, I'm just trying to build you a good project.
Yeah.
And I said, and anything that we change on this project is going to have a piece of paper that backs it up. And so when he started to see that, he didn't understand it at first, but when he started to see that, his entire attitude changed. Until this day, I still talk to him too.
Yeah. So it started out adversarial, and then he saw that you truly were trying to give him the absolute best building, that you could give him. So
yeah,
and that comes with trust, like what you were saying, it comes from the clients too. They got to trust and be willing to work with the contractor as well and build that relationship. So, yeah. So just to wrap up, I know we could say a lot more on client relationships. What would you give as a piece of advice to anybody who's starting a general contracting business in regards to client relationships?
Don't.
Just don't start a business.
Now, don't stop that again.
Oh, geez.
It's a tough business because you're not just a contractor.
You're a therapist too.
You're a therapist. You're a babysitter. You're a legal beagle. You're all
legal
these.
beagle.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta know way more than just construction. I mean, and it's not. And I shouldn't even say you got to know construction, because that's even misleading, because you've got to know how to build properly. Even if the plan doesn't show it properly, you got to know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm finding is extremely hard. We touched on that in the plans and regulations and stuff like that, but that is probably one of the toughest things out there. And that's why, if you're going to be a general contractor, you got to know not just, how to put the house together, but you got to know how to put it together per drawings, per code, per that area, per, whatever new stuff that the new owner is going to want.
And keep your clients happy.
And just, it's so many different things.
Yeah.
And, you got to deal with the drama along the way. You got to deal with your own employee problems. You got to deal with, subcontractor issues, quality issues. You got all these things, and it's and you get into a bind. You got to know how to handle it legally, and properly, and it's really it's a pretty big thing to bite off.
Well, here's the thing. You have to be able to do all of that, but if you don't have a happy customer at the end, you're not going to get referrals or repeat business. So that's why client relationships are so important. And, obviously you have to have the knowledge and the legal, you got to be a legal beagle, and all of that. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but at the end of the day, if you are not turning over clients, you're not going to have a successful business. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to. So, happy clients, you could do your best for some clients, but some are never going to be happy. Some think that they know better. Some think that they're better than you are, but yet they don't own a construction company and never have,
Yeah.
never will, but they know more than you do. Which I'm being facetious, but I'm just saying that there's people out there you're never going to make happy. And it breaks my heart. I really am in this industry. I love to do what I do. I love it.
Yeah, no, I know you do.
I've been doing it for a long time. But what really gets disheartening is when you put in a lot of effort into something and people don't see it or recognize it, I should say, and they just think, oh, that's part of it. It's like they don't understand what goes into it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Trying to get product here, with this, ever since COVID, trying to get stuff to a job site on time is just difficult. And it's a moving target. Sometimes it'll show up next day, and other times they're like, oh yeah, I got stuck on a ship. And you're like, really? It's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get screamed at, and there's like, I didn't do it,
Yeah.
So, I cherish the people that appreciate what we do, and just know that behind the scenes in every contracting business, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, from, ordering to making sure it's the right product, to attachment methods, to changing your backing out in the field to accept that new product, to making sure your subcontractor knows how to install it right, to monitoring it to make sure it gets installed right.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many things. There's things called manufacturer's installation instructions, making sure everyone's following those. I mean, there's just so many things, which probably that's another good podcast coming up, like manufacturers install instructions and that kind of stuff, and submittals, and how to tie all that together. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for talking to us today about client relationships and a little bit about contracts and some stuff that we'll definitely be getting into at a later date. I think overall the takeaway is, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it really does take the client and the contractor to really work together to have, a very happy, good outcome. But, got to keep those clients happy.
That's true. And that last thing you said is probably the most true, is they have to work together.
Yeah.
If a client just throws up their arms and just goes, you're the contractor, you figure it out. But some of my best jobs have been when the client comes and goes, hey, I got this idea.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? Let's hear it. And then you're like, hey, you know what? And you may not use it totally, but you incorporate it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you come out with this great outcome that everyone had a part of, and everyone's a team,
Yeah.
So
that team mentality is so important. So,
All right, I think we're done.
yeah. Well, thank you, you guys. And we will see you guys soon. And thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends.
Thank you.
Bye.